Hello everyone, and welcome to Top Team Testing. In this series, we look at a team that has recently done well in a tournament and analyze its strengths, weaknesses, and common game plans through the lens of several games and a best of three. Ideally, in the span of about 15 minutes, you should feel comfortable enough with this team to take it to a local or a small online tournament. Today, we're featuring the team that MasterMark used to get top 12 in the North American stages of Players' Cup. I think that this team is the last gasp of what is considered the traditional TornOgre archetype. Now, technically, the Tornadus Kyogre duo did do pretty well in Players' Cup. However, most of these teams are fundamentally different than what we think of as TornOgre. The teams that John and Sam and others use have a Kyogre that is meant to enable the Venusaur. It gives it a way to take fire type attacks and also fire back with powerful water type weather balls to KO its counters. And Kyogre cleans up the games after Vinelash does a lot of damage to opposing teams. In contrast, traditional TornOgre uses all of its other team members to enable the Kyogre. The team that was dominant at the start of the metagame had Tornadus, Regieleki, and Max Airstream Kartana to provide Kyogre with the speed control it needed to clean up games. This team still has a Tornadus, but in place of Kartana it has a Zapdos to provide powerful Max Airstreams. These form a powerful pin. There are very few Pokemon that resist Zapdos' attacks as well as Kyogre's water attacks. The weakness policy Metagross gives it a powerful secondary mode, and the Tornadus has Brutal Swing to activate its weakness policy. Finally, Urshifu and Rillaboom round out the team as two of the best endgame cleanup Pokemon ever made. Urshifu in particular really benefits from all the speed control, and Zapdos Urshifu forms a duo reminiscent of the powerful Thundurus Urshifu leads in Series 7. The team has so many powerful options that it's tough for an opponent to account for all of them. So with that, let's get into the games. The first game showcases the power of the Tornadus Kyogre pairing. You don't actually get to lead Kyogre Tornadus that often, but in this game we do into a Dragapult and a Grimmsnarl. They Dynamax their Dragapult and we taunt it because we really didn't want them to get a Dragon Dance off. They get their Light Screen up and Max Airstream nearly KOs the Tornadus. Kyogre gets to Water Spout from full health and it does a quarter damage to Dragapult and 3/4 to Grimmsnarl. Turn 2, we push to Metagross and they go for a scary face into Metagross as we Tailwind and then KO it with a Max Phantasm. This gives us a free switch into our Urshifu. Now Grimmsnarl gets Reflect before getting knocked out by a Hurricane, and then Urshifu ignores the Reflect and KOs the Dragapult with a Wicked Blow. They bring in their last two Pokemon, an Umbreon and a Zacian. We don't want Zacian to get a substitute up, so we taunt it and close combat the Umbreon, doing about half health. Zacian's Behemoth Blade drops Urshifu down to Focus Sash, and then Umbreon KOs the Tornadus with Foul Play, letting us get Kyogre in on the last turn of Rain and Tailwind, and guess who can't protect? Close Combat KOs the Umbreon while a single target Water Spout misses the KO on Zacian, but their Close Combat also fails to KO Kyogre and they concede. This replay showcases how powerful Metagross can be. I swear you don't get to lead Tornadus Kyogre into every team, but we do it again this time, into a Regieleki and Urshifu. This is the freest Tailwind Water Spout of my life, and while they do protect the Regieleki, we bring Urshifu down to Sash before Kyogre takes about 2/3 from a Wicked Blow. We read into Sucker Punch and protect Kyogre, and we read correctly. Our Brutal Swing KOs the 1 HP Urshifu and chips the Regieleki as they Electroweb into our Wakenberry Tornadus, doing about half and revealing a Life Orb. They bring in their Dusclops, and they get to reveal our items as they protect the Regieleki once again. We taunt the Dusclops, and we miss the Origin Pulse into it. They get a Nightshade off into Kyogre, which we barely survive, and we do want Tornadus to get another Tailwind up, so we switch it out into Rillaboom as Dusclops Shadow Sneaks to KO the Kyogre, and Electroweb does very little, but funnily enough, it makes Rillaboom slower than our switched in Metagross. We Dynamax and eat a Volt Switch as Calyrex comes in and Steel Spike does a little under half to the Dusclops. We then get to Side High Horsepower to proc our weakness policy, and from here, we are off to the races. They go for a Nightshade into Rillaboom, but now they are forced to max guard the Calyrex because the Metagross would otherwise KO it. We get to Grassy Glide into the Protect, but we do get our second defense boost by Steel Spiking to KO the Dusclops. They don't have the bulk to win this game in front of a boosted Metagross, and thus they bring in Regieleki and concede. This game showcases some of the weaknesses of the team. If you can't power through opponents, it's often difficult to win the game through damage mitigation techniques. In this game, our opponent leads Lapras and Umbreon, a very passive lead, and we lead Metagross Tornadus. We Brutal Swing to proc our weakness policy, and the Lapras does outspeed the Metagross, getting up screens and KOing the Tornadus with a G-Max Resonance. Our Rockfall does about 2/3 damage to the Lapras, meaning it just barely missed the KO even if we did move first, and we get Yawn for our trouble. We bring in the Urshifu, and they go for a Max Guard as we close combat the Lapras. We Steel Spike the Umbreon for a bunch of damage, and they get a second Yawn off into Urshifu, and Metagross falls asleep. Now here I decide I want at least one Pokemon awake and switch the Urshifu into Kyogre as they Baby Doll Eyes and Max Geyser it. We take a sleep turn and both of our Dynamaxes end. Now Kyogre goes for a Thunder to KO the Lapras, but sadly we don't get the one turn wake with Metagross, meaning Foul Play gets to knock it out. They bring in their Thundurus and we bring in our Urshifu. We are forced to protect with Kyogre as they Wild Charge it, and Wicked Blow just barely misses the KO in response. They get a Yawn into Urshifu, and here they switch Thundurus out into Zacian, reading the failed Sucker Punch. Water Spout fails to KO Umbreon and does about half to Zacian, and they get another Yawn off. Urshifu falls asleep, and Zacian goes for a Protect, and while we do KO the Umbreon with an Origin Pulse, we're still going to need to get very lucky with sleep turns because Kyogre has also fallen asleep here. We don't wake up on one turn to Sucker Punch Thundurus. They get to finish us off with 2 KOs very easily. Now let's move on to the best of 3. If you're wondering what happened to Zapdos, don't worry, this is the matchup for it. We're playing Duck Pond's Palkia team. Zapdos has needed to take care of Ferrothorn at the endgame, but is also our main source of offensive pressure as a Dynamax. Game 1, we lead Urshifu and Rillaboom into Grimmsnarl and Palkia, and we decide to do damage before screens go up. Palkia Dynamaxes and we Grassy Glide, Reflect goes up, and then we Wicked Blow crit the Palkia to ignore the screens and do half damage total. He goes for a Max Geyser, bringing Urshifu down to Focus Sash before Grassy Terrain recovery. Palkia then goes for a Max Guard as we double into it, and Urshifu goes down to a Spirit Break. We bring in Zapdos and then hard switch Rillaboom out to Kyogre to give it some boosts. Zapdos Dynamaxes, he gets up a Light Screen, and we do a quarter damage to Palkia with a Max Airstream before it does 75% to Zapdos with a Max Geyser. His Dynamax ends, and we pick up a KO with the second Max Airstream before nearly KOing the Grimmsnarl with a single target Water Spout through Light Screen. His Spirit Break leaves Zapdos with 4% HP and a reduced special attack as Porygon 2 comes in. We switch Zapdos out to Rillaboom. We still need it alive for the Ferrothorn in the endgame, and Kyogre does over half to Porygon 2 while KOing Grimmsnarl with Water Spout. He sets up Trick Room while Grassy Terrain and Rain ends, and he reveals his last is Ferrothorn. We switch Kyogre out for Zapdos before faking out the slot that's more likely to target what is now a Zapdos. We take some chip and Porygon 2 recovers. Here, we protect Zapdos as Ferrothorn gets an Iron Defense and Foul Play targets that protect. Rillaboom U-turns off the Porygon 2 and Kyogre comes back in. We really have to preserve Zapdos, so it switches out into Rillaboom and we protect the Kyogre. Body Press does over half to Rillaboom, and Eerie Impulse is revealed to be the last move on Porygon 2 as it hits into our Protect. There's one more turn of Trick Room and it can't go up again. We fake out the Porygon 2 and Ferrothorn KOs Rillaboom with Body Press before we do over half to Porygon 2 with Water Spout and about a third to Ferrothorn 2. Trick Room expires, Zapdos comes back in and protects as Water Spout KOs the Porygon 2 and crits the Ferrothorn before it goes for a Lead Seed into Kyogre and gets a ton of recovery. He protects Ferrothorn and our attacks are pretty meaningless, but Rain does end and he recovers all the way back with Leech Seed and leftovers to half health. We just have to hit the Heat Wave, we go for it, we hit it, and we win the game. Moving on to Game 2, he leads Grimmsnarl and Palkia into Tornadus and Metagross. We both Dynamax, and he gets Reflect up as Brutal Swing procs the Weakness Policy. Geyser crits to KO Tornadus, and Steel Spike KOs the Grimmsnarl in response, only letting him get one screen up for this game. We bring in Kyogre against his Porygon 2, and we find out that Kyogre is faster than Palkia as we Origin Pulse, also doing about half to Porygon 2 thanks to preventing Light Screen. Geyser does about 69% to Metagross, nice, before Metagross KOs the Porygon 2 with a Steel Spike. Ferrothorn is revealed to be the last Pokemon as it takes over half from a Water Spout before Max Quake KOs Metagross. Kyogre gets lead seeded and we bring in Zapdos. We go for a Protect to match the Ferrothorn's Protect as Thunder brings Palkia to about half and Hydro Pump whiffs into our Protect. Zapdos was supposed to Hurricane, but instead goes for a Thunderbolt, but that plus Thunder is enough to KO the Palkia as Body Press does very little to Kyogre without its boosts. Ferrothorn gets the HP boost and it's time to not miss. We hit the Heat Wave doing 90% and then we hit the Origin Pulse to clean up the match. So what can we take away from this? Kyogre is still one of the most powerful Pokemon in the format. Your opponent has to respect it at all stages of the game. A single speed boost or tailwind can let it do so much damage, and powerful spread moves create strong pins with Zapdos. Although we didn't showcase it, Kyogre is also a powerful Dynamax option, resetting Rain if your opponent changes it, and getting off boosted 150 base power moves even if your opponent chips it down. Either way, it paves the way for powerful endgame Pokemon on this team. Urshifu and Rillaboom can either clean up games once your Max and Kyogre have brought everything down to low health, or it can chip things down for your Kyogre to clean up games. Rillaboom isn't especially common on Kyogre teams, but its ability to hit Regieleki is very valuable. It can also ignore opposing speed control with Grassy Glide, which is really valuable since you rely on moving first. If your opponent invests enough resources into getting speed control up at the expense of an HP advantage, Rillaboom as well as Urshifu's Sucker Punch can really punish that. That's also the position where maxing Kyogre is usually the most powerful. The other two main Dynamax options, Zapdos and Metagross, are both incredibly powerful. Zapdos allows you to power through frailer teams, while teams that rely on outbulking you often can't trade damage effectively with a Metagross that has attack boosts and gets defense boosts. Finally, Tornadus is an incredible enabler for basically all offensive teams. However, the team isn't without weaknesses. As with most offensive teams, if you can't power through your opponent, you can run out of gas pretty quickly. There are 3 common damage mitigation options in the format. Defensive Dynamax is relatively fine for the team to handle. They can't boost their physical defense and special defense simultaneously, and you can hit hard from both sides. If they can get both screens up, then you have a problem. You are often forced to lead Metagross into Grimmsnarl teams and get the turn 1 KO, but that isn't always feasible. Finally, the team has very few ways to counteract sleep moves. Yawn is problematic, and Amoonguss requires an immediate response. You do have Taunt on Tornadus, but it's only on the field for so many turns, and if you're clicking Taunt, you're often not clicking Brutal Swing or Tailwind. You can often win games against one of these weak points, but the fact that the most common team in the metagame right now is Grimmsnarl Venusaur, having weaknesses to sleep and screens certainly isn't ideal. That being said, there's a reason why Kyogre has been a metagame defining offensive threat for so long. The tools around it need to be adapted as the metagame develops, but it's safe to say the infamous TornOgre partnership, especially with Zapdos, is alive and well. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe, and until next time, I will see you all later.